Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Today we're going to be starting our first episode of crowdfunding. So this is a temporary name. I would love some suggestions or anything you'd like to see in the comments below. But crowdfunding, this is our look at some new crowdfunding games, whether they're ending in the next couple days or if they're brand new to the crowdfunding scene. These are things that I would love to talk about. So I want to share my thoughts on them, what I'm thinking, kind of the thought process that I went through when I looked at these things. And these 4 games in particular we're talking about are Lands of Galzyr, Excavation Earth, the new expansion, Earthborne Rangers, and lastly, Flamecraft. So in addition to covering new games and games that are about to finish, I also want to talk about some of the crowdfunding games that have recently entered the library. In particular, today we have Barrage as well as Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. So I want to cover both of those things today. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the first one. So the first thing that I want to talk about today is I want to talk about Lands of Galzyr. So Lands of Galzyr is a storytelling game, very akin to something like Sleeping Gods. So this has you playing as these cute little animals. You are basically kind of in a world very similar to the Dale of Merchants world. So this is a very small, cutesy little farm animals, but also just kind of nature-esque, very, very gentle in nature, as opposed to something threatening and terrifying like the lands that you might see in Sleeping Gods. So once again, this is the Lands of Galzyr. Now, first off, to separate itself, it is going to introduce weather systems. So these weather systems here, they're going to be based on seasons. So you kind of follow through year after year the longer you play. But where it differentiates again is it's going to be in 2 different modes. The first mode is going to be a competitive mode, actually. So it's a storytelling competitive style. Think something like Tales of Arabian Nights, where you're going to be leveling up your character and trying to do the best you can. Or you can play as a pure co-op. So right off the bat, there's some choice here. It does go 1 to 4 players. It takes at least an hour, potentially 2.5. But the big difference here is that this game focuses on the story over everything else when it comes to mechanics. So it uses a dice system that you're going to be using. And I want to go ahead and show off a video that I've found here. This is from the Meeple Mountain YouTube channel. I think they do a great job in showing what it actually looks like. So here is the test system itself. So what you're going to be doing is you'll be interacting with these different spaces on the board. They have a storybook point that you'll be accessing, and then you'll go into this application. So you have to use the app to play the game. The app will give you results for tests and different tests that you might want to do. So first thing is you'll have a choice. So let's take a look at this one here. So you right off the bat, you check if you're at a settlement, you hit yes or no, and then you have some different choices. You can climb somewhere safe. You can recall how to treat shock. These are all different choices based on the scenario or situation you find yourself in. So right off the bat, you're going to notice there's a lot of use of the app. A lot of choices. You're going to be clicking, following, answering questions, conferring with the board. And the board basically is just a check for where your character is and what options you have available to you. Now, once again, you're not really sure exactly what type of scenario this might be, and each character has a set of stats here. So let's see if I can find the characters here. There they are. So the characters here, they have a wheel of stats, and those stats determine the number of dice that you get for challenges. And those dice have different faces that are going to be used for said challenges. So simply, you'll pick the test that you want to do, and then based on your results, you'll select specific, specific answers. So basically, on your turn, you move if you want, you interact with the space, and then you do your best on said challenge. You have item cards that can mitigate your luck along the way or give you additional successes, and these, you can have about 3 of them underneath of your board. And to me, that's really all this game has to offer. It takes the nuance and the cool connectedness and kind of like the open freedom and adventure of Sleeping Gods, and I think it reduces it down a little bit too much, in my opinion. In Sleeping Gods, you have the very interesting combat. You have these vast amount of card combos that you can take, the piling on of abilities, and I think that's what makes Sleeping Gods really special, in my opinion. However, in this one, you kind of strip all that away in order for the sake of simplicity and for kind of a one-time offer. off play, right? Because this is only going to take about 2 hours. So if you are akin to if you like something like Tales of Arabian Nights, I think that this might be a great game for you. It's when you can go in, have fun, tell some stories, but the gameplay, the mechanics are not going to be as deep. You're not going to have as many choices. For example, you're rolling the dice and you get a single reroll, I think, and then potentially your items can mitigate things. But there are some positives to this game too. So the cool things about this is the board itself. First off, it's got those two different sides, right? The winter board and then the summer board. It has cards that are actually going to go on the board, and you can change the map, and I think that's really neat. It has this filing system where you can keep cards very nicely, so for the items and the different world-changing cards. And I do like the idea of using an app to help tell the stories. It makes it so you can update things, it makes you can change things. Now for me, I think that I'm going to pass on this one. I don't think it's something that we necessarily need. I think there are a lot of games that do focus on the storytelling aspect, but I think that this one here it's very cute. It's very cool. I like what it does. I think that the test system makes sense with the different dice. If you have any interest in this one, I'd love to hear what you think in the comments or anything that I missed on here. Are you backing this one? Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Lands of Galzyr. So that's the first one that I wanted to talk about today. The second one is a fairly new one. Oh, once again, you could find Lands of Galzyr on Gamefound. So the second thing that I wanted to talk about today is a new one that came out this week, and one that I'm kind of on the fence about. It has a fantastic theme, and that's for sure. This is going to be called Flamecraft. So Flamecraft is a world of dragons, but these dragons are cute and nice, and they're all about helping out the citizens. And you are a flamecrafter. It's your whole job to communicate with dragons and to help them, help you create all of these different things. So you're not necessarily going to be fighting any dragons. You're going to be actually doing a worker placement style game with a lot of shared engine building. And I think that's the big tagline here. And you're going to be doing that through these market stalls and your dragon cards. So once again, I do want to show off a video, and this is from the Hungry Gamer. A big shout out to him. I think this does a great job in kind of explaining what's going on. So Hungry Gamer here, he has done a great job with his how to play video, and it really goes into the nuances of the game, and I think it does a great job showing it. So if you have any interest in learning how to play this game further, very high details, I would go check out his video. But this is a very quick overview of what the game looks like. So on your turn, it's very straightforward. You take your character, you move it to a space, and you get two choices at this space. You either are going to gather resources at the space and potentially play dragons at the space, or you're going to enchant it, which is like the contract fulfillment of the game. It's why you're getting the resources. And I think that's really neat. So the big thing here is each space is going to start off very simple. So it might look like this. We got the Duncan Dragons. And I just want to put it on the record here. The artwork for this game is absolutely fantastic. I know that I think a good portion of people might be backing it just for the artwork, which I think totally makes sense. It's gorgeous. But the mechanism seems sound. You go to a spot, you get the resources that are listed. So right here, you get a toast. Or as you play, you get to actually increase the potency of that card. So you're going to be matching these dragons from your hand, and the dragons have to have a symbol that matches one of those empty spots. Like that first spot says you need a toast dragon. If you put the toast dragon there, you get the reward on the right. So in addition to that, every time somebody uses that action space in the future, they're going to get the effects of the dragon, one of them at least. So you get to, whenever you visit to gain resources, you get one dragon plus the resources provided by the location, which I think is really neat. The second action you can do is you can fulfill those contracts, though. So that's why you're gaining those resources, right? And these contracts come in all shapes and sizes. So these are the contracts. They might require specific items or pairs of items, and the number of pairs you turn in, the more points you get. When you complete those contracts, not only do you get the points that they offer, but you'll also slide them under the location you fulfill them at, and you'll trigger every single dragon that's at that place. So I think that's kind of sweet how, yes, it's good to build up dragons, and yes, you're trying to build up specific dragons in order to really, push forward the efficiency of certain spaces. But you always have to visit a new space, and everybody else can use that space. Now, in addition, this is a worker placement game, right? So if there's a space that's occupied, you can still go there. However, this has positive player action where, based on the number of people there, you have to give them gifts. So you have to give them some of your resources for visiting the same spots as them. So it really discourages visiting the same places. So this one looks very fascinating to me. Now, I'll be straightforward with you. This is very much on the light side. So this game in particular, it does not look like it's going to offer the highest level of strategy, but I do think that it looks like a great time. It looks like something that you can jump into, you can have a lot of fun with, and you can enjoy the theme and the art. It really does look very charming. They've unlocked a lot of stretch goals, and let's just look at where they're at right now. They're at $723,000. That's insane, and it's like constantly going up. This is a project that is, I'm sure, for sure, going to hit that million mark. But this artwork alone, really, it's just a huge advertisement for this artwork. Some of the add-ons are just like art prints and coffee tables. But I mean, if you've got the assets, you go ahead and market the hell out of those, right? Because holy cow, this looks great. The amount of stretch goals are crazy. There are definitely Kickstarter exclusive things here. So some of the specific cards, some of the specific contracts, and they even have a deluxe edition that is available here. This is a limited run, so the deluxe edition is not necessarily Kickstarter exclusive, but this is the best place to get it most likely. But I'm really torn on this one. I'm not sure if this is going to get played a lot after like its initial, bring into the library. This might be a, ooh, it's so pretty, let's play that game. Ooh, it's neat, but I don't know if this one will stick. Let me know what you think. This one, I think that a lot of people will have, so I'll probably be able to pick it up later if it is good, and I'm most likely will get a chance to play it. So I'm curious to wait on this one. Let me know what you think of Flamecraft. Let me know if this is something that interests you. If you enjoy the artwork, if you enjoy the theme, if you're a fan of worker placement game, would you get these add-ons? Would you get the art of Flamecraft? Because let's be real, these are pretty fantastic. I love everything that this game is about. I love the artwork down to a T, but I'm not sure if the mechanics are going to be gripping enough and be something that I want to really invest in that whole time. So that's Flamecraft, one that we are not currently backing, but I'd love to hear what you think about it. Now, the next game I want to talk about is an expansion, actually. So this expansion here is for Excavation Earth. Now, this is a David Turczi game, and this game is all about market manipulation in space. So this is the expansion, which is cool because as the expansion of the game is on Kickstarter, that means that the base game is already out. We have reviews. We know what people think of this game. Now, realistically, when you go for an expansion, if you don't already have the base game, you're probably just going to get it all, right? Because this is a great way to get a Kickstarter edition of the base game. You have some solo modes available. We've got Kickstarter exclusives that you can come back and get. So if you are interested in this game and you want to grab those Kickstarter exclusives, this is a good time. But for me, the big telling thing for me was, how are the current reviews and how does this thing play? So the big thing that I wanted to check was let me pull it up here, the reviews. So that's huge. So let's look at the reviews. So Board Game Geek has a lot of reviews. It's sitting at about a 7.5 right here. And this is after, several ratings. So there are about 400 ratings for the game. And they tend to fall around the 8 category, but with leaning more towards 7s and 6s. So not very many 10s, not very many 9s, but a solid amount of 8s. Now, the biggest things that I've seen here are that this game is very similar to something like Brass Birmingham. So Brass Birmingham here is a game where you're going to be using cards to drive your actions in order to build things and eventually make connections and, buy things at high prices and sell things at low prices. Or sorry, sell things at high prices and buy them at low prices. And, talking specifically about the coal and the iron. This one in particular, though, it is often compared to that. So just for example here, thinky, tactical market manipulation game, excellent solo. The solo bot imitates a person, though, for the cons. So he's got some positives and negatives here. It has you wanting to accomplish a lot of things. You have some tough choices when it comes to actually completing those. So very tense, very tight game. And the market manipulation is supposed to be very, very good in exactly what it's trying to replicate. Now, on the negative sides, though, there are a lot of negatives here, even just from some lower ratings. So we'll even just go down to the 7s here. So some of the negatives that I've received for this game are that, number one, it's way too long. This game is about 3.5 hours long, super, super long. The other thing is that it is very convoluted. So it has a lot of actions that don't really make sense, a lot of actions that are not very thematic and that are hard to teach, and that you have to keep on remembering constant references to the rule book. This probably will be smoothed out over multiple plays, but a lot of the times it is going to be a difficult one. So here's one here, Kiara Woods one. He says, hard one to rate, great premise. Not really sure it translates to the gameplay really well. So once again, kind of seems like a theme that does not really work, rules for just rules. And that's kind of an issue that I have with a lot of heavier games, is that sometimes the rules are just, they're just there to make the game appear more heavier. Maybe a mechanism that doesn't need to be there, not as refined as something such as brass. So one of the big criticisms I see here is just play brass. Like, if you're looking for a game like this, that might be the one. This game does have one thing that I think is really interesting that reminds me of another game that I've recently played. This is Daimyo. So Daimyo is a game where you're going to be doing area control, but you're also going to be grabbing these tiles. And in Excavation Earth here, you are picking up these tiles in order to collect sets, as well as to sell them on the market to make money. Money is points in this game. And the whole thing in Daimyo is you're trying to collect just the sets to get additional area majority points. But they both share that similar mechanism where you're going to be going around the map of Earth, and it's your job in order to kind of pick them up and collect them. So very similar in mechanisms, but I don't think it's a mechanism that I really like, because a lot of the time it is very tactical. And in a giant, heavy game like this, you are going to have to wait until it's your turn, and then you're going to have to analyze the board from that moment based on the cards you have in your hand to make decisions on these pieces that are all over the board that you're going to have to play cards to move to. And once again, those things can change. The black market where you're picking up these tiles can change. It just seems very, very much like a game where the downtime is going to be incredulous. And most people, that's the biggest complaint with the game, is that the downtime is huge, that the game does take forever. But they do like the market system. But I am going to reiterate this, that I would recommend that you just play brass. Once again, from the majority of reviews I've seen, that's what they say. And that makes sense to me. I think this is one that I'm going to not attempt. I'm not going to even try to back this one. Not one that is particularly grabbing for me. I really like the theme. I really like the artwork here, but not one that's going to enter the SideGame library, but one that I would love to give a try. If you've played this game, I'd love to hear what you think about it in the comments below. I know it's been out for about a year now. It's a David Turczi design. It's a very solid designer. I love Tekenyu. I love Anachrony. So I'd love to see how this works and how his hand is at a market manipulation game. But that is Excavation Earth. So now the last project that I want to talk about is for this is a project that I've bagged all in because I do think it is so good. Now, this game in particular is by a squad of designers that I just think is, bar none, the best team in the business right now. Just for me, I think that they make some of the best games, and this is going to be Earthborne Rangers. Now, if you saw our episode of Corporate Cardboard over on Dan's channel at Chairman of the Board, I talked extensively about this game there. All I knew about it at that time was the designers and kind of a loose overview of the action system. But Earthborne Rangers here, just from the ground up, this is a recipe for success. So first off, let's just look at the story as a whole. So you have a post-apocalyptic world where the world is recovering from apocalypse. You've succeeded in kind of turning it back and, revitalizing the earth. And I just think that's such a fresh theme. You play as a ranger in a valley somewhere in North America, very northern North America. You are basically, completing missions in this settlement and doing your best to, succeed and just be the best for your community. And I think that is so cool, that it's a very positive look on a post-apocalyptic future. Now, the card systems themselves, I think, are very, very solid as well. So first thing is that this is an LCG. So if you are familiar with the LCG model, that means that you're going to be constructing a deck beforehand from a pool of cards, and then you're going to be using that deck in scenario-based play. Some big notable LCGs that are some of my favorites are Marvel Champions, the Arkham Horror, the card game, and Lord of the Rings, the card game. Now, that same design team, some of the members from those design teams are working on this game. And that's why I said this is a star-studded cast here. Now, in addition to those members of the designs team, the Sadler brothers, the people who are responsible for games like Street Masters and Alter Quest, they are also part of this design team. They have worked together in this new company, Earthborne Games, and their whole goal was to create a game that encompasses the great scenario play of Marvel Champions with the storytelling of Arkham Horror, with the exciting resolution of tests and combat that you find in Lord of the Rings and the other Alter Quests and Street Masters, with fun and satisfying card play. And I think they've done it extremely well. So, for example, here you have, let's go ahead and pull up one of the examples so you can see a little bit of the gameplay. So this one in particular, this is on the, let me see if I get it. Here you go. So this is the One Stop Co-op Shop? Yep, One Stop Co-op Shop. So they've done a great video here on the gameplay. And first off, the coolest thing that you're going to see right off the bat is whenever you take a test, so something like this, you'll have the option to spend as many of your attribute tokens. So instead of having like a action system of cards in your hand or like a single resource, what's going to happen is every turn you're going to have a resource pool that you dip into. And each character is going to be a little bit different with their resource pool.
Brainstorm is going to...
So let's see if I can find it here. Here we are. All right. So as you can see behind here, there are all these tokens on this card. So each character is going to have a different number of tokens based on, the person they pick. This is their aspects. So these are going to power your actions. So on your turn, when you are playing cards, the cost of a card might be a green 1. That means you have to spend 1 of your greens. So if you don't have a lot of greens, you're not going to be able to do a lot of stuff with green cards. So when you're building your deck, you probably should include a lot of green cards since you'll be limited in options. However, this character's got a lot of blue, so they're going to be allowed to play really high costed blue cards, I think is really cool. In addition, when you go on tests, you're going to be spending these tokens in order to actually compete in these tests. So as we saw with that giant lion over there, so let's pull him up again. So this line here says it's a fitness challenge. So in addition to spending your red tokens to get successes, you also can discard cards in your hand that have matching symbols. So it's got kind of a mix between the Arkham Horror resolution as well as the, I don't think I've seen the resolution of spending your resources to get pluses. Like usually there've been cards like that, but I think that's really neat that you can either commit your resources to play cards or commit them to complete challenges. I think that's neat. The other cool thing is this has a modifier deck. So something similar to Gloomhaven, where you're going to be flipping the top card of a deck and it's going to look like this. So you'll flip that top card and based on the challenge that you're doing, it's going to give you a bump or it's going to give you a debuff to your stats. And I think that's really neat. So first off, you can kind of math it out. Very similar to something like Sleeping Gods. You're going to know, okay, I know that there's only this many cards, and I believe there's like a 2/3 chance of always getting either a 0 or a +1. And I think that's really neat for each color, but there are -2s, -1s, 0s, and +1s. So I really like that. And you can, as the cards are going to keep on revealing, you're going to be able to see and kind of memorize and even more so know your chances on specific colors. And I think that is really cool that you can track that. Adds a little bit more to your risk taking, which I think is cool. There's also a symbol on the bottom here. So this is a red symbol. So that means that based on what you do, what challenge you're fighting, if you hit a specific symbol, an additional effect might happen. So right here, if you're trying to climb this mountain, if you hit that blue symbol, an additional effect will happen. And I think that is really cool that the cards are going to react differently based on the test results. So you're going to have a different experience every time. You might get lucky and hit a green when you're fighting this animal. Or if you hit that red, it might fight back and suffer an injury. So that seems pretty terrible. But I really like how this works. I like this system. I like the way that the action system works. And I just think it's a great take on a great theme in this game. The other thing I think is really cool is each character is going to have their own player area, and these player areas are going to be on their own kind of separate mats here. So in your separate mat, you have what's called a near section and a far section. The far section is what everybody can interact with, and the cards themselves will tell you where they show up. If they're in near, they're engaged with you, essentially. So this little arrow up in this right corner here means that Aatrox is with you. You've got to deal with it. But if it's something like that giant mountain, that's going to be in the far section, which means that you're going to have to actually go up to it and probably interact with it that way. And I think that's really cool. I really like this idea of positioning mattering. See that little plus arrow? And you are currently engaged with something. I think that's really fascinating and really fun. So I'm excited to see how this one plays out. It has the narrative story deck that is found in Arkham Horror. It has the scenario construction very similar to something like Marvel Champions, and then the playtime varies. You can play the one-off scenarios, you can play an entire campaign, and the Kickstarter itself is going to have lots of different options for you to jump into. And I think that this is one that if you are going to get anything, this is one that you should jump into. I think that it is a really awesome gameplay standpoint. It's only got about 2 days left, so I do think that you should jump into this one as soon as possible. And some of the artwork is fantastic. The storytelling, I imagine, is great. And the gameplay looks satisfying, straightforward, but also very thoughtful. I'm so excited for this one. We are definitely going with that gameplay all in to get everything, and then we'll decide on all of the upgrades and whatnot afterwards. But this is one that I'm extremely excited for. That is Earthborne Rangers. That's the one that for sure is going to be added to the collection. Once again, solid team, solid gameplay. Looks amazing. Yeah, fantastic. So if you are interested in Earthborne Rangers, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear what you think about this game. Are you kind of burnt out on these LCG games? Do you have one that you prefer? Have you ever tried an LCG game? Is this something that you're interested in at all, or completely uninterested in? Would you rather be jumping on Flamecrafters or Excavation Earth? I'd love to hear what you have to say. But let's go ahead and jump into the next section. So those are the 4 big games that I wanted to talk about on Kickstarter right now. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the... Hey, Scylla's joining us. She says she's running errands, she can't stay, but excited to watch this later. Well, thanks for hopping in for a little bit, Scylla. I appreciate you stopping by. But next up, we're going to go ahead and jump into the next section. This is going to be the section where I talk about games that are entering the library from Kickstarter. So the 2 games that we have so far this month from Kickstarter have to be, well, they are Terraforming Mars, Ares Expedition, as well as the Barrage board games. And so first off, let's talk about Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. So this has received a lot of positive and negative buzz. First thing is that you've got oh, perfect. So Scylla says that she's curiously paid off Flamecraft. That's the second one we talked about today. So when you watch it back later, it'll be there. I hope that our thoughts align. We'll see what it says. So yeah, curious to hear what your thoughts are too. Thank you for joining us. So Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition has received a lot of positive and negative buzz. Now, the first thing is that it delivered early to targets. So this is a Target exclusive now, and that means that anybody can go get it. You can go to your local Target, pick it up. Fantastic. I think that's really cool. I think that's awesome that you are able to get a copy a little bit early, and you're able to jump into a hobby with a very solid game. As you can see my rating there, I think this game is real good. Like this is a great game. Now, I'm not going to beat around the bush. My rating on regular Terraforming Mars is also extremely high. I think that Terraforming Mars is also a 10 out of 10 game. But the other reason that people were upset about this was the Kickstarter backers did not receive their copies until about a month after it was available at Target. So we got ours last week, and we've been playing the heck out of it. This game is real good, real fun. It is exactly what it sets out to be. It sets out to be a mixture of Race for the Galaxy as well as a mixture of Terraforming Mars, and it does it beautifully. Now, the way it's going to do this is through phase cards. Let me pull up some pictures for you here. But these phase cards are very straightforward. On your turn, you're going to pick one of these phase cards that you like, reveal it, and then that's the action that everybody gets to take, and then you get a bonus. Many games have copied this structure, and Terraforming Mars is Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition, no exception. Very similar structure to a lot of games. However, the way that this does this is it is taking all of the mechanics from Terraforming Mars, and it's put them into these specific cards. There's now no turns. What happens is whenever one of these phases happens, you just do whatever you can as much as possible in these phases. And I think that is so cool. However, with some limitations, the biggest limitations are actually playing your cards. So development and construction are the ways that you play your cards in your hand. The green one lets you play the green cards, which are production generally. And then the construction action lets you play your blue and your red cards. And I think this is so well done because obviously you're going to start the game with like 8 cards. You have so many choices and you're going to want to play them all, but it's all about predicting what other people are going to be doing. So you are generally going to have a faction that's going to lead you down a specific path. And you really want to make sure that you're able to, do the best you can to maximize the amount of value you're getting for this faction. Now, this is switched up a little bit, though, because you can never repeat these actions in the same turn. So you have to really time it appropriately if you want to do something twice in a row. Is it worth not playing your green card because you think somebody else is going to play the green card to play something else? Or do you need to play your green card now to guarantee that it happens? It's really interesting because sometimes if you call that perfectly, then, oh my gosh, it's going to be so satisfying. If you chose production and somebody else chose green and you're able to play a great card and then produce immediately with that card, it is so satisfying. But if you whiff, it could feel so bad because maybe you're giving somebody so many of these resources that you did not get yourself. So it's really interesting, kind of the push and pull here. And each faction here is also really plays into that. So first off, let's look at the factions here. So they're very similar to base game Terraforming Mars. You're going to have the cost, you're going to have tags, you're going to have production as well as effects. Generally, they are going to represent themselves very similarly to the different ways that you play them in the original Terraforming Mars. You have ones that are good with steel, one that are good with titanium, some that are great at ignoring restrictions. But I think that in particular, the The factions translate extremely well here because of the resource boards. So I want to just show you these resource boards and what they look like. So the big thing here, the big change to the resource boards is there's 3 additions. The first addition is the card track. Now there's actually a production for cards. I think that's really cool. I think that should have probably been in the base game. I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think J. Rick here, it's perfect. He loves the game. So many awesome cards. He wants to keep them all. And that's another thing I really like about this game is that the cards that you're drawing into your hand, you don't have to make that decision right away if you want to keep them. And that makes them an even stronger resource, as well as even harder, in my opinion, to throw away. It hurts so hard. In the original Terraforming Mars, when you get a card in your hand, you have to make that decision immediately if you want to keep it or you want to buy it, keep it for $3, or you want to just get rid of it. In this game, you get all the cards. And so that decision hurts even more, in my opinion. And it's that positive stress where it's like, oh man, I want to play all these cards, but if I keep them, I'm losing out on money. I'm not going to be able to play as many cards, and that's going to slow you down. So a lot of times in this game, I find myself getting rid of really powerful cards to play, I guess better cards. But yes, totally agree with you here. The cards are great. Now, in addition to the card income, you also have your regular incomes that you get in the base Terraforming Mars. You've got the income, you've got heat, you've got plants. But the not weird, I should say, just a very different way to do this is they have changed the way steel and titanium works in this game. Instead of collecting resources for these things, they are just passive bonuses. So what happens, for example, if you have 4 steel? If you have 4 steel, every time you buy a card with a steel tag, you just get minus $8 to it. And so you never have the resources. You don't have to deal with that. But it's also kind of like it's kind of a weird thing, right? Where you're like, man, I wish I had these resources and I could use them for other things. But that's just a mental thing. Realistically, it does the exact same thing, which I think is really cool. In addition, I think it's a little bit more powerful because you never actually have to produce if you are investing in steel and titanium, which I think is really cool. Because generally, if you needed to produce them, you're feeding everybody else who's been generating money and cards and heat and plants. This is it's a really cool aspect of the game where if you are focusing on these 2 specific productions, you don't have to worry about the production phase, actually. And I think that is so fascinating and so interesting to me. And I really like that twist on the gameplay. Now, the next thing that I want to carry about this game is one specific action in the game that did not exist anywhere in the original Terraforming Mars, and this is the research action. So we talked about all the other phases, right? You have the development phase where you play your green cards, the construction where you play your event cards and your action cards. The action phase is where you're actually going to spend your resources to take actions. The production phase is where you're going to produce all those resources. But the 5th action here is research, and this seems like it might be the weakest action, but I think this is actually my favorite action in the whole game. When you play the research card, if you're the person who played it, you get to draw 5 cards from the top of the deck, keep 2. And there are lots of cool blue cards that are going to maybe modify this. And the reason this is so important is one of the biggest criticisms in the original Terraforming Mars is I'm never getting cards that are going to work with my engine. Well, if you are consistently researching, drawing multiple cards, and picking the best ones out of those cards, and maybe developing cards that are going to help you with that, you're going to find those cards that are actually really good for your engine, and you are going to be able to implement them into your strategy. And I think that is so awesome. And this goes into that card play and that prediction where it's like, hey, I know you're going to play green. I know you are all about production and you're all about actions. I'm going to sneak in a research here, and I'm going to make sure that I can find things that really feed my engines. I played a game the other day where I played as this faction who's all about microbes. And oh my gosh, I used the research actions so much. And every time I was just finding tags that would work, finding animals, finding stuff that it was my highest scoring game of this I played in a long time. It was about 87, 90 points, which is crazy because usually end game score is after we've been playing for a while and like 55, 56. So I love this action so much. I think it's so good. I think it's so neat that it's here and that there are cards that work with it. It is so good. I love this action. I just think it makes a lot of sense. Now, the game itself is, I think it's fantastic. I think if you're looking for this style of game, it's exactly what you expected it. It's a compact version of Terraforming Mars. It retains the same feelings, but it introduces a very interesting action selection system. So at the end of a game, it might look something like this. So once again, it's really compact and it's really the cards you're playing, but this is not as dissimilar as a regular game of Terraforming Mars, in my opinion. I think that looks very, very, very akin. And I really like the system here of the simultaneous play as well. I think it's really nice for keeping the pace of the game well. It reminds me a lot of things like Race for the Galaxy and San Juan. I really like the flow of those games, and this is it to a T. So if you like Race for the Galaxy, if you like San Juan, if you like any style of game like this, or if you just like Terraforming Mars, give this one a go. I'm quite surprised with how much I like this game. I think it's done a great job in condensing the gameplay, in serving as a quick experience of Terraforming Mars. Now, that being said, I still really like Terraforming Mars, the original one. I think it's so fun. I think it does a great job. The board really matters in this game. As you see in that picture, there's no board in Ares Expedition outside of just, a tracker. In Terraforming Mars, though, you actually have the interaction with placing pieces on the board. You have to kind of time things appropriately with your action and your double action. So there are some huge differences gameplay-wise, but that's going to add to the length of the game. The drafting is the best version of this game, so that's going to add to the length of the game. I think that this still has a place in anybody's collection, and I think there's room to own both of them. I think they both offer positives and negatives, but man, I think that you are going to be very pleased with Ares Expedition. So that is the first game that came in through Kickstarter from us. The second game that we had come into the library was not actually a full game. It was kind of like a mini expansions. So big game that I really fell in love with a while ago was the game Barrage. So I think Barrage is, once again, another 10 out of 10 game. I think it's absolutely incredible. And we are lucky enough to be able to jump into the newest expansion. So this new expansion, the Leewater Project, is not the one I'm talking about. We're actually talking about the 5-player expansion. So the 5-player expansion for Barrage introduces the most ridiculous board I've ever seen. So in the base game, you have the four reservoirs on the top, 3 in the middle, 3 on the bottom. But in the new one, it is wide and it is crazy looking. It cracks me up just how busy this board looks. I think it's so funny. I don't know if I'll play this game with 5 players, but the fact that it exists, I think it'll be fine, actually. This is a game where it has a long play time, but your turns are so short because it's a worker placement game. You'll be putting stuff on the board that the long game time is not a huge issue. There's usually been no big problems with this. I could play this game. I could play this game for hours because it really does fly by. I love that the actions are so succinct and so well done. Another cool thing here is it offers more spaces. So obviously, if you have 5 players, there's going to be some more contention for those different spaces. So it adds 2 separate boards here. One for a new initiative track and one for some more spaces. And I think that makes sense, right? You're going to need to have more spaces if you have more players. Now, really quick, going back to Terraforming Mars, I've got Emily C here in the comments here. She says that I like the city building and standard action still in regular Terraforming Mars. Totally agree with you. Once again, I still think Terraforming Mars is an incredible game. The city building is absolutely wonderful. It really makes you consider your placements of your plants. It really makes you consider, are you going for points or are you going for those terraforming conditions? Totally makes sense. Totally got you there. The standard actions do still exist in the Ares Expedition. So in the action phase, you can take standard actions. Those also exist in Ares Expedition, but they're only able to be used in a specific phase. But they do exist. So if you are kind of wondering what they've done with those, they do still incorporate those. And I think they do it well. They reduced the price for a couple of things to make up for, I assume, specific cards. But I think that it does a great job of translating the standard actions. But totally agree with you. I love the player interaction and the tenseness of the board control in standard Terraforming Mars. So great point there, Emily. I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, the other thing that came with the 5th player expansion, we got another wheel. Now, that being said, we do have wooden wheels in our library, so we had to go find a replacement wheel. Unfortunately, the ones that we were using, they were all sold out, so we had to get a janky wheel. It doesn't really match, but it still looks good. The other thing it came with were metal coins, and these metal coins look real good. They are blue, gold, and bronze, and they look really nice. Like, I was quite surprised how well those work. We also got more of the little machines here. The little machines are very useful because in the game, you're going to be taking machines, putting them in that wheel, and then you're going to be rotating those constantly. And a lot of the times, once a machine's stuck in there, it's stuck. Like you can't get it out for a while until it, gets all the way around. They're kind of like think of it as your workforce. You sent them to go work on something, and then as soon as they're done doing their job, they come back and you go send them out for something else. So I really like having those extra little machines. I think it's really helpful because sometimes it's hard to make change in this game. Now, the other important thing that this expansion came with were new abilities. So I forget the specific name for these, but the new abilities here, I think, are a mix. So they're kind of hit or miss, in my opinion. So these two in particular, I think, are just okay. They're just okay, unfortunately. The first one, we went ahead and played with 3 out of the 4, but the first one that we played with was this one here. This one just says that you get 8 machines at the start of the game instead of your regular ones, and these are wild machines. Yes, it's a cool ability, but honestly, not that exciting. So, I mean, yes, it sounds great, but ultimately, if you're budgeting well with your machines that you actually have and that you're using like normal, these are not the craziest things in the world. In addition, it can really stink when you're paying these purple machines to activate the projects in the expansion where you have to permanently get rid of them. It can really suck if you spend one of these. However, it can be very powerful because you could be flexible. So you've got some choices here when it comes to spending your machines. This other character here, he says that it takes 2 workers and you can take a 3rd build action for 2 instead of 3. Once again, not extremely exciting, gives you a little bit of efficiency, but depending on what's happening on the board, this might be something that you use a lot, or it might be something that you rarely use. So unfortunately, these two, not that exciting for me. I wish I could say differently, but yeah, not that exciting. So unfortunately, the first set of promo officers, not that exciting. Really quick, Emily C here, she says that she's got the wooden wheel for Barrage. The game is so tight. I absolutely agree. This game is like, it's so interesting because you don't really have that many resources. So it's not something like Power Grid where you're having to do math with big numbers and really like penny pincher stuff. But the thing that's tight are the spaces. Like you have 12 people that you get to use. And when you put workers out on the board, that's it. And some actions like putting like just one extra worker there can really throw off a round, and it can hurt sometimes. And so timing is huge. Getting into that space first is huge. I think that's so fascinating. It's so satisfying, but I love how you're constantly playing and you're always knowing what you want to do in your head. So there's not a lot of paralysis here. And I think that's awesome. In addition, that board, that main game board where you're going to be putting your dams and you're going to be putting your conduits, etc., power plants, that fills up so quickly too. And it can stink so bad when somebody goes to the spot that you want. And now you've got to pay that extra if you want to go to the same, simpler spot. I think it's fantastic. So I absolutely agree with you. Extremely tight, but I think that makes this game so good. I love Barrage. I think this game's amazing. So these 2 executive officers, though, the last 2, first one here is Dr. Octavius. So clearly it's Dr. Octopus, but his whole thing is, I actually really like this ability. I think that this promotes for some really interesting gameplay. His whole effect says that when you are taking water in order to, produce energy action, you can take it from 2 dams that are connected to the same power plant. That is so awesome. This is so cool. It seems pretty, not as straightforward in effect, but I think this is nuts for getting extremely high power generating actions. So in the game, if you're not familiar, you're going to be taking water, putting them through conduits to generate energy through power plants. So it's kind of like a process. You have to go through 3 different machines to take a production action. And then all the water that you've used is going to spurt out at the bottom. And so generally you can only take from 1 dam at a time, but he's going to allow you to take from multiple dams, which is going to give you, varying amounts of power in order to fulfill contracts. And I think that's so cool. I love that this promotes really interesting setups. It really promotes putting your power plants in specific strategic locations and allows you to be flexible with the different contracts out of the market. So I really like this one. I think this one's really cool. And the last one here is, it's really interesting. You are allowed to take a production action equal to the amount of water in your dams. That is so interesting. I think that's so cool. Once again, it promotes a very interesting style of play. It's going to have you using and utilizing a lot of the water producing actions that you might not normally use. And I think that's really fascinating, really cool. Now, one last thing I do want to mention about the Barrage promos and all these new expansions that we got was our package for this was actually stolen. So we didn't actually get this package when it was supposed to arrive. Our package was stolen, but we reached out to Cranio and we let them know what happened, and they were very happy to replace our copy. It was so awesome. They were able to send us a new package. So very big shout outs to Cranio Creations here. We just had to pay the shipping fee, which makes sense, but they were able to get us these missing components. So very happy with these new expansions, new promos. I think that the extra machines, and the coins are a huge improvement to the quality of life. I love that 5th player option, being able to open up the game to more people. I'm just extremely ecstatic for Barrage altogether. So tell me, have you played Barrage? Is this something that you're interested in? Have you ever saw this game, maybe been scared off of it? Any interest in trying, or any recommendations? Do you have strong feelings about this game? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Please let me know down in the comments below. And that's really it. That's all that I wanted to really talk about today. I'll go ahead and open up the floor to any questions and maybe any Kickstarter projects that you might like to see us cover in the future, or heck, if we have some time here, we could cover them now. I'd love to hear any opinions or any thoughts. So once again, this is just kind of trying out the waters here, seeing if this would be a good idea, something for the channel. I don't really want to go in depth on every single Kickstarter, because realistically, a lot of those aren't really going to float my boat. A lot of them don't look that exciting. A lot of them are very generic, not something that I really want to dive into, but I did want to highlight some specific ones that I think deserve some attention. And so that was the whole idea behind this, was to go into the games that I think deserve the spotlight. So if there's anything you'd like to see, whether it be with this whole layout of the show itself, if you want to do a job at picking the name, crowdfunding is pretty great, right? But if you have another suggestion for potential name for the show, I'd like to hear that as well. Or if you have any games that we should go check out. Once again, we do have some time here, so anything that you'd like to see, I'd be game for. All right, it looks like we have Emily here with a response. Sadly, selling Barrage. Way too much to manage rules and end around. Just got Grand Austria Kickstarter, and we're about to play today. Interesting. Interesting, Emily. I'm surprised you say that. I think this game makes a lot of sense. For me, the rules themselves are extremely thematic. So this one, it honestly has not been that big of a bear to teach, in my opinion, with the rules. In addition, I love the end of round layout cards. I think it's laid out extremely well with how it goes from top to bottom on the productions, or sorry, on the like checking the scores, doing the income, etc. I think it does a great job laying that out. So that's interesting that you think that. So I'm sorry that it doesn't work for you. I know not every game is for every person. So hopefully the Grand Austria Kickstarter is going to pan out something more enjoyable for you. So that's really cool. That was one that I was very much on the fence about, was the Grand Austria Hotel. I had heard some issues with the turn structure about, how you do the snake draft, so you have a really long time between turns. But I hear that the expansion maybe have fixed that. So let me know what you think. I'd love to hear any of your opinions on Grand Austria Hotel. I hope you have a great time with that today. That sounds great. And then Emily says, it's kind of a follow-up to what we just talked about. We all fought for production of Barrage. That makes sense to me. I think that production is probably the strongest action. So that's how you're going to be fulfilling the contracts, right? So that makes sense to me. I think that's kind of the point of the game. So that is a fair criticism if you don't enjoy that. And then the next one here, production versus water flow confused people. Okay. Interesting. Once again, I haven't had this experience. Generally, it's been pretty straightforward, kind of like, I love the way that the map is laid out, where you can visibly see how the water is going to flow down. And then you can, I think it's very intuitive, like 1 block holds 1 water, 2 blocks hold 2 waters. That's really fascinating. So I'm curious. I'm curious to see. Maybe I'll run into that in the future, and that's something that I need to be aware of, is that make sure I make a very clear delineation between production versus water flow. So makes sense to me. I'll make sure that I keep out for that in the future. But I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate your engagement. And if you have any suggestions about any of these games that I talked about, so once again, I'm very much on the fence about Flamecraft. I think that Earthborne Rangers is a no-brainer back, and then Excavation Earth is one that I would rather just play brass again. And then lastly was Lands of Galzyr. It looks like Tales of Arabian Nights, but also can be cooperative. Or Sleeping Gods, missing all of the complexity that I enjoy, if that makes sense. So those are my final thoughts here. If you hadn't seen this stuff before, that's kind of where I'm at right now with Flamecrafters and Lands of Galzyr and Excavation Earth. But Earthborne Rangers, if you're gonna get anything this week, that's the one you get. Emily says she's on the fence for Earthborne. I think that it's a no-brainer. I think it makes total sense. Now, I love all of the LCGs, and the fact that they've got the whole team behind, not the whole team, but they have a lot of the team behind those LCGs behind it. I think it's surefire win. I really do. And the theme is so interesting. I love the setting. I think one of the coolest things was the thematics for me, where they're taking this idea of, hey, this is a post-apocalyptic realm, and we've succeeded in resetting the world. It's back to being in its great prime. And so as you're exploring, you're going to find, ruins and relics and machines from, the days where we were trying to fix the world. So you might find, something that's producing oxygen or carbon dioxide or something like that, or you might find some like a construction plant that's like abandoned or something like that, or you may find a specific species of animal that was created to fill in missing gaps of the ecosystem that has evolved beyond what we thought it would evolve to. And I think that is so fascinating, so interesting. So I think the theme is incredible. I love the action system, how you're going to be using it to play cards or to take tests. I love the modifier decks and how that has that specific event tag on it. I think that's so cool. This just, it looks like a great evolution for these LCGs, but also has that familiarity for something that you may be engaged and want to try. So I think that you should pull the trigger, Emily. It looks amazing to me. It looks like it's not as crazy as a gateway. But the one thing that I think is interesting is that it's an LCG, but it's on Kickstarter. I think that's interesting. I wonder if they will continue to release more product over. I'm curious if they'll open up that project for future expansions, or if it's going to be retail expansions, something like Arkham Horror, etc. So that's what I'm wondering is, will there be more content for this? And if there is more content for this, how will it be available? So will it be something like Fantasy Flight does, where I'm going to get a pack every month or something? So, ooh. Back it all? I can't back it all. Not anymore. I can't do it. I have to be selective. I cannot back it all. But I totally agree with you here. Cancel the pledge for Dale of Merchants, Open World, Gamefound, Sleeping Gods. Yes, I did the same thing. I looked more into the gameplay. Right off the bat, it sounded like something that I would really enjoy, really love. But when I delved into it a little bit deeper, I felt that it did not have the gameplay to back up the story. It reminded me of something like, I know this might be blasphemous, but like Near and Far. Near and Far was not a good game for me. I thought that the gameplay was not that exciting, and the story itself was very lacking. And I thought that was something that I didn't really enjoy. So when I saw that Ryan Lockett released Sleeping Gods totally blindsided me with how good it was, because I was expecting something like Near and Far. But Sleeping Gods is incredible. I think you'll really enjoy that one. But Dale of Merchants looks like it takes the idea of this open world like Sleeping Gods, mixed with the kind of card placement that you kind of see in Seventh Continent with, places evolving. But it also removes the complexity that I think adds to the fun of Sleeping Gods and replaces it with a simple dice rolling system for symbols. So I think if you're looking for a narrative game, that's probably going to be fun for you. It's going to be one that you're going to go in, you're going to tell a story, you're going to have a great time. But I don't think it has the mechanics or gameplay to back it up. So I think that this is one that I'll wait on and I'll probably try. I actually think that I would compare Lands of Galzyr most to Destinies. I think that it's very similar to Destinies, where you are going to, everybody, if you play the competitive at least, you're going to be working on your own destinies, doing this like your own specific quests, and then one person is going to win and the game will just be over. That's how I feel like Lands of Galzyr is. It reminds me a lot of Destinies, where it has that gameplay where you're kind of just going to a place, doing an action, and hoping something goes well, and you're doing something to progress your stats or progress your cause. You use those items to increase your dice rolls. So I think that out of the two, I would rather play Destinies actually than Lands of Galzyr. It uses that same app system, but I think the test system seems more fun and exciting, and the stat customization seems more fun and exciting in Destinies. So I would actually, if you had a choice, if this is something that interests you, I would try Destinies before I would jump into Lands of Galzyr. So that's my opinion. But once again, I haven't played Lands of Galzyr. This is based on looking at gameplay videos, in particularly looking at the Meeple Mountain video. I thought that they did a great job covering that gameplay. So I really did get a feel of the game. So those are my thoughts on Lands of Galzyr and Sleeping Gods. So I think Sleeping Gods is incredible. That's another 10 out of 10 game. We're talking about lots of good games here today. Terraforming Mars and Lands of Galzyr, or not Lands of Galzyr, Sleeping Gods and Barrage. Those are great games. And Emily C says, Near and Far wasn't bad for me. Got samesies after a while. That's exactly how I feel, Emily. Like the resolution was of the tests were kind of very similar, about all the same. The maps did change, yes, but it was purely an aesthetics, not really gameplay. And I kind of felt like I was doing the same gameplay loop every time, where getting the squad, trying to go out as much as I can, getting the 2 connecting points, and just was not that exciting in my opinion. And you're very welcome, and thank you for joining us on this stream today. And that is going to wrap it up for today. So thank you so much for joining the stream and for the good conversation. Thank you so much, Emily and Jay Dulrich and Scylla, for your contributions to the chat. I really do appreciate you being here and spending some of your Sunday with me. But thank you so much for being here and for exploring these Kickstarters. I hope you found something useful, something informative here. Kind of got to look into my thought process on what goes into my mind when I'm looking for these Kickstarter games for the library, as well as my quick reviews over these games that have entered the library. So once again, big takeaways: Earthborne Rangers, incredible, looks amazing. If they're going to back anything, I back that one. Flamecraft, very much on the fence about. Lands of Galzyr, Excavation Earth. They're not going to enter our library. I think that there are games that do what they do better, in my opinion, based on reviews and just looking at the gameplay. And then lastly, Terraforming Mars, Ares Expedition, absolutely incredible. And the last thing is Barrage upgraded components are absolutely amazing. So that's that. That is the crowdfunding inaugural episode. But thank you so much for watching Side Game Strong.